Hello friends. Well, since my 3D printer is down right now, waiting for a part, I figured I would do some other interesting techie things to pass the time. And fortunately for me, one of my friends dropped off a Raspberry Pi 3 for me to set up for him, and what better way to benchmark it than to install some applications and run them. This is not what they want on there. However, this is what I'm going to put on there. So today we're going to install RetroPie 4.3 on a Raspberry Pi 3. And it's actually a pretty easy process. We're going to go through the basic, where you find it and what you get from it. So you go to the RetroPie page, which is retropie.org.uk, and it takes you to the page. And basically RetroPie is a front end for various different emulators that play classic video games and arcade games. There's a MAME component, there's a Super Nintendo component, there's a Nintendo component, there's a Game Boy component. You name it, there's probably a component for it. So we'll get into some of those a little bit later when I get a chance to take one of my Raspberry Pi 3s out of circulation, and I'll be able to install some things, or maybe I'll have some opportunity this weekend to do a few extra videos on the one that I'm setting up for my friend. But for the sake of time, I'm going to zip through the first part just a little bit quicker, and I'm going to go over the process, but I've already done the process, so we don't need to actually do it again. The first part we did was we went to the download page, and we found where the current version, latest pre-made image, is 4.3. I'm not going to build the image, and I'm not going to put it on top of anything else. I'm just going to download the pre-made, because that's normally what most people would do. So I downloaded the 4.3 pre-made image, and I picked the Raspberry Pi 2, 3, because that's what I have. If you have a 0 or a 1, you would pick this one. If you try to download the wrong one and burn it to your micro SD card, and it gives you an error about invalid, invalid block or something like that, then you downloaded the wrong one. Just go back, download the other one. That's all it means, is that when it does the check to find out if your CPU or your processor or your Raspberry Pi is the proper version, it will fail, and that's how it fails. So like I said, if you get an invalid, I think it's invalid block error message, just download the other one. Okay, so we've downloaded it, and now we have this image file. So what do we do with that image file? Well, we take our old buddy Etcher, and here you can see the RetroPie 4.3 RPI2_RPI3.img file. So I've already got that selected. I selected the drive, which was my micro SD card, which I had in the reader, that I plugged in through the USB in my computer. And when I selected the drive, I made extra sure to make sure it was the absolute correct drive, so it didn't overwrite or wipe out one of my other component drives in my system. And as soon as I did that, I hit flash, and about 3 minutes later, it came back and returned a positive result. Now, my preferences for Etcher is that I have validate write on success turned off, because sometimes it gets a little confused on partitions that Windows can't read directly. So I turned this off because I found that it gets a little wonky. Eject on success, perfectly fine, and I don't care about sending anonymous reports and usage statistics to resident.io. But I don't want to select the unstable update channel, and I don't want to put it in unsafe mode. So those are really the only two. If you're going to run anything, I usually uncheck validate write on success, because I have better luck with it off. I'm not saying you have to, but when I do things, I don't like it on there, because it does a check on a disk it can't read, and even though it's successful, it just seems to take a long time. Anyway, it takes about 3 minutes to burn the flash drive. I've mentioned this before, but if you guys want me to do a video on what a Raspberry Pi is and how all the components work and what they are, I'd be happy to do that. But at this point, if you're watching this video, you probably already know what a Raspberry Pi is, at least to some degree. It's a single board microcomputer. to allow for low-cost computing and low-power computing, for especially for things that are in countries that are underdeveloped or in economic turmoil and can't afford to give actual computers and things like that. It's also a great way to set up a single-purpose computer to put together some kind of server. I had one running RAS for a while and put all my media on it, and eventually I went to a Windows Server for a entirely different reason, because I needed to run a pretty heavy-duty SQL database on it. So the Raspberry Pi was not potent enough to run the RAS and to run SQL and a couple other things that I needed to do. So the old gaming PC that I had from the year before got retired, Windows Server got put on it, and the Raspberry Pi got commissioned into doing other things. And that was only a Raspberry Pi 2. Probably a Raspberry Pi 3 may have the horsepower to run a small database and a remote storage unit, but I don't know. We haven't gotten into that yet. I haven't had an opportunity to try it. So we've written our disk and we're ready to go. So now I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to switch over to the Raspberry Pi as it boots up, and I'll let you watch what happens. Okay, so we are booting up, and I forgot to do one thing. All right, I wanted to run a wired network on this. Okay, so we have one gamepad detected. And in case you're curious, what I'm using for a gamepad is I'm using the controller for my Xbox One plugged in through USB. There's a list of approved controllers and what the USB interface can handle. Usually anything PS3, PS4, Xbox One, Xbox 360, any of the Logitech USB controllers, anything that plugs directly into the Raspberry Pi is generally good. So we have to press the A button. And it found out what we had, so it knows what we had. So we got D-pad up, D-pad down, left, right, start, select, A, B, X, Y, left shoulder, left trigger, right trigger, left, right, up, down. Okay. I don't have any more lefts. Okay, so it gave us a little too many key selections. All right, so we are running the configuration now. And here's the things you can configure. So you've got audio. If you go into audio, it says auto, headphone jack, HDMI, mixer. Right now I've got no sound. So we'll pull HDMI, because that's what I'm running on. Bluetooth. Ah, now I have sound. Okay. So Bluetooth, certain Bluetooth devices can register and unregister. So we can go in here and it'll search for Bluetooth devices. I'm not going to do that because I'm using USB configuration editor, which allows you to manually edit the configuration. I really don't want to do that right now. Themes, so you can install and uninstall different themes. And these are the default ones that come with RetroPie. And there are a number of them. I'm not going to go over all of them. You can choose and pick and choose which ones you want. File Manager allows you to move and copy files within the Linux file system that this runs on. So basically, you get your game files on a flash drive, you put the flash drive in, you can go into File Manager and copy them around. You can also do this through SSH, which is how I usually do it, but File Manager is a little more difficult to work with on the keypad. But as you can see, you can maneuver around the Raspberry Pi. Here's where your ROMs go. And these are all the different capable ROMs that you can put on here. Some of the key ones to look at. I know some people are very excited about the ZX Spectrum and the Vectrix, but the Super NES, Sega CD, Sega 32X, PC Engine, which I believe is the TurboGrafx, PlayStation 1, NES, Neo Geo, and 64, Mega Drive, which is Genesis, Sega Master System, and the main one, which is the one that I use mostly. Now, keep in mind that with the ROMs that you have, you should own the game itself. Now, I use a lot of MAME ROMs, but they're games that I own the boards for. I don't own many boards anymore, but there are a couple that I do own. So technically, I have more ability to run those than somebody who just downloads them. But there are a number of different arcade and home video game system things you can run on here. But if you're going to go into File Manager, I would highly recommend that you use a keyboard, which I did not. Okay, so I am effectively stuck. Hold on while I get out of here. I will be right back. And here we are back at the main menu. So let's go back into the configuration. So this launches the RetroArch GUI so that you can change the RetroArch options. And all of your options in here have pretty good explanations. There's your configuration, your information. And you can fool around with those. NetPlay, so you can set up your ports and your host name and such. Now here is your RetroPie setup. And when you go in, it'll unpack it and it will execute it. Now, we want to run the update RetroPie setup script. Well, let's do the update all installed packages. And now we have the latest update script. And now it is checking for updates. And this is basically one of the first things you should do, because if you can't pass the first update test, there's really no point in using the system. So getting past this initial update in Linux can sometimes cause problems. And it's better to find the problems before you load all your stuff on there instead of waiting until afterwards, because if you load all your stuff on, you run the update after that, and the initial update is usually one of the larger ones, and it blows up, then you are out all the time it took you to load those ROMs on there, because if you reflash the disk, it erases it. So running the updates before you get started is what just makes sense to me, because then if it still boots after you run the updates and everything's still working, then you're in good shape to go forward. If it blows up after you install the updates, which I have had happen, then you didn't waste any time. Well, if it blows up after you've installed everything and you update it, you wasted a lot of time. So again, I am using an Xbox One controller plugged directly into the Raspberry Pi through USB, because I don't have an Xbox 360 controller right now, and my Logitech I gave to my daughter, so I don't have anything else I can use. But like I said, there are other options you can use. Just check the list to see. Most of them are compatible. While this is going on, maybe I can take a look at what it has. And with version 4.3, you can actually use the control block to plug in different types of controllers as well. So it will be more compatible. And like I said at the beginning of the video, since I'm setting this up for a friend, I am not going to be keeping this. I'm just doing this for the sake of the video. So we're going to do some installs on here. We're going to explore some different Raspberry Pi builds and images and things you can do and see exactly what's out there and what is going on in the Raspberry Pi world at this point in time in 2018. A lot of people underestimate what the Raspberry Pi can do and what it's for and what, well, just what it's capable of. And I just want to show some of the functions that it can do. So there's going to be a series of videos of different objectives to do on the Raspberry Pi, and this one is creating a Raspberry Pi virtual arcade. And with this one, since it's my friend's and it's going to have something else on it, it's in a standard black case. There's a number of cases you can get for them. You can get ones that look like NESs. You can get ones that look like little arcade cabinets. You can actually get a USB controller that plugs into it that makes it really look like a little arcade cabinet. Now, the last time I did this is about where it blew up. But this gets us all the latest versions of everything. Since we haven't been in anything, none of the configuration files are up and running. But after it does this, we'll make sure that it boots, and then we can proceed to look around a little bit, even though there's not going to be much on here because we don't have any ROMs on it. And I'm not going to put any ROMs on this one. but your update process should look similar, and I'm running this in real time, so you have an idea of about how long it's going to take in order to finish the update. And thank goodness for friends who like quirky technology too, so that I can have one of these to play around with for videos without having to take down one of my CryptoCoin miners or one of my other servers or one of my other devices that's currently operating. Even though technically it's not too hard to do that because I have a number of micro SD cards I could put in there, and basically you swap the micro SD card, you're swapping the hard drive on the Raspberry Pi. Now, one of the videos that I'm going to do is some of the images for Recalbox and RetroPie are rather large. And one of the things I want to try, and I want to see if I can put together a video on, is using an external drive of some type to break up the Recalbox or the RetroPie image. And that way you don't need to buy a 200 gig micro SD card, because those are pretty pricey now. What are they running? Well, that's not much. Okay, not as much as I thought, but a good one. One of the Samsungs is probably going to run you about $70 to $150, depending on whether you go up to a class 10 or whatnot. Checking current prices. The SanDisk Ultra 256 UHS-1 card is 170 as I make this video in 256 gig configuration. So to avoid having to spend the $256 or the $170 to get the 256 gig card, I would kind of like to show you guys a way to do it without having to do that. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get to that at this point, but it's something that I would like to try to do. And thank goodness they are making bigger micro SD cards, because I remember when 8 gig was big. So all packages updated. Thank you for bearing with me while I none of that needs to be done. And this just controls the different settings of what you see at the menu. This will show our IP address. Obviously not going to turn that on. And there's various splash screens that it can display. So there's some amount of configuration that you can do to this. And we're not going to connect to Wi-Fi. But in anything that you do, like the controls at the bottom, B goes back, A launches it. So we'll go back to the main menu. We actually have nothing to select because there are no ROMs loaded. And then this is the settings screen off of the main menu, which is just basic stuff. Okay, we have 0 games in our collection, which is fine, because I'm not expecting there to be any. But you could set your VRAM limit. You could set it in power save modes. And there's a number of different things, but we're going to restart it just to make sure it reboots after the update. And after that, we'll all be done. So this is a reboot. Now, one thing that you have to remember is that Raspberry Pis run on Linux. So you don't want to just pull out the power cord. You want to shut it down properly. So you want to tell it to restart, or you want to tell it to shut down. You don't just want to kill the power. You sometimes have to, but if you can at all avoid it, definitely avoid it. All right, so that is a basic video on how to install RetroPie version 4.3, from downloading it to installing it and going through the configuration files. And in future videos, we'll get a little bit more in depth, but I wanted to get a video about the basics of it first, because then I can reference that video when I get into more advanced stuff and dedicate more time to doing the other things and less time to the actual installation. So this video is going to serve as a foundation for the other videos to draw back on, so I don't have to do this again every time. So I hope you bear with me on that. I'll have more videos about Raspberry Pi stuff. I'll have more videos on the 3D printer later. Basically what happened with, well, I don't want to get into that, but I'm waiting for a part. As soon as the part comes in, there'll be more 3D prints, and we'll take it from there. But for now, I'm going to do some Raspberry Pi videos, and we'll get some stuff going on. And with that, I think I've explained fairly easily how to install RetroPie version 4.3, which is a similar process to pretty much any version of RetroPie that you want to do. Just remember to download the file, burn it to your SD card, put the SD card in, boot it, update your system, get started running, and then copy your ROMs once you verify that your system still works after the update. And that's all there is to it. So if you have any questions, put them in the box below. I'll do my best to answer them. I am not a pro at RetroPie. This is just something I fool around with occasionally, but I will try to do my best to answer your questions. If you have questions on Raspberry Pis, definitely ask me. I will try to help you out with those. If there's anything else I can do to help you out with it, let me know. If you want to find out more information about something specific, be sure to ask, and I'll definitely get to it when I can. But for now, that's all I've got, and look forward to more videos on this at a future date. I'll see you guys later, and thanks for watching.